Hello and welcome to How to Win in Court Without a Liar. I'm Dave Horowitz and I'm your host. I just wanted to say that I'm happy to be here today. I will be joined about 6 o'clock by Kelby Smith from hisadvocates.org. Kelby's been helping people get from the public to the private and shares the truth of the law that sets you free from the system. And it's kind of like a little bit about the topic that I'm going to be talking about today. I will be speaking about Public Law 97-280, and the truth will set you free. Public Law 97-280, if you don't know, is basically back when under Ronald Reagan, he made public law 97-280, along with the 97th Congress joint resolution, and basically it was to proclaim 1983 as the year of the Bible, but is recognized that the government recognizes the Bible as the Word of God, and that is absolutely important on the private side. It's I've said before, the best trust ever written is the Bible, and it is absolutely based on Public Law 97-280 recognized by the government and in their courts. Being that it's a public law, you can actually give judicial notice that the Bible is going to be used as law in that courtroom, and that you are covered under that as opposed to under the public's law. Public law says that the public recognizes it as God's word. I'll read a bit from it. It's not very long. I'm going to read the whole thing, actually. It was pretty short, but there's a lot of good things in here that are helpful in dealing with the courts. Let's see here. Okay. Public Law 97-280, 97th Congress Joint Resolution, authorizing and requesting that the President proclaim 1983 as the year of the Bible, October 4th, 1982, Resolution 165, whereas the Bible, the Word of God, has made a unique contribution in shaping the United States as a distinctive and blessed nation and people, whereas deeply held religious convictions springing from the Holy Scriptures led to the early settlement of our nation, whereas biblical teachings inspired concepts of civil government that are contained in their Declaration of Independence, the public's, their Declaration of Trust, and the Constitution of the United States, which is the trust indemnity for public servants. Whereas many of our great national leaders, not that I can remember any, it's saying here, Washington, Jackson, Lincoln, Wilson, paid tribute to the surpassing influence of the Bible in our country's development, as in the words of President Jackson, that the Bible is the rock on which our republic rests. And I think it's important because in order for there to be a republic, the government would have to recognize the individual man or woman as a sovereign, and that they are the servant. Okay, not the way they do it now in the public, where they believe they rule over you with, a giant hammer and a gavel and tell you what you can and can't do. But the republic, it says here, the Bible is the rock on which the republic rests. So in order to get a status in, outside of the public, okay, your creator is over you, okay, that's the only authority over you, and then you, and you have authority over yourself because you own yourself, and then you've got individuals who started governments. Not all individuals, and not all individuals are a party to it. Okay? This is saying that it is the rock on which the republic rests. So if you think about that and do a little research on what a republic is and how it is to protect the individual from the masses, and it is also to protect the private from the public. Okay, I'll go on. Whereas the history of our nation clearly illustrates, and I'm reading it verbatim because some of the stuff I obviously don't wind up with, but whereas the history of our nation clearly illustrates the value of voluntarily applying the teachings of Scriptures in the lives of individuals, families, and societies. Whereas this nation now faces great challenges that will test this nation as it has never been tested before. And whereas that renewing our knowledge of and faith in God through Holy Scripture can strengthen us as a nation and a people. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that the President is authorized and requested to designate 1983 as a national year of the Bible in recognition of both the formative influence the Bible has had for the nation and the need to study and apply the teachings of the Holy Scriptures in government. So they recognize it as the Word of God. It obviously supersedes this government and is therefore a higher authority. And it's a way to go in there because they made it into a public law. It's a way for you to actually go in there with your Bible and have them take judicial notice of what's actually in it. Unfortunately, they never open it up. Not unfortunately, I'm sure they probably turned to dust if they opened one up and looked in it. Half of these people that are acting as judges and lawmakers and things like that. But it will separate you. It will set you free. The truth of the Word will set you free in a courtroom. In a courtroom. Okay? There are there's scripture in there that flies in the face of being ruled by men. Okay? And this allows you to basically give them judicial notice that of the Word, and then open it up and learn how to use it, and the authority that you walk in, okay, as a man or a woman, as opposed to a person, a citizen. Even your status can be changed just by making your claim in court that you're a man created by God, not a person or a legal person or a legal fiction created by government. And you've got evidence to back up your claim in the Word. Okay? It's there. And it's there for you to use, okay, if you know it. I've heard it said before that, it's not the truth that sets you free. It's the truth that you know that sets you free. So if you're looking for truth and you're looking, to find the truth in things, go back in etymology, and the ultimate private side trust is the Bible. You're not going to find a better written trust out there anywhere. Okay, it does protect you from this world's system. Okay, you see this in countries all around the world, most common law countries, every country. You've got men that are men or women that are acting as if they are God over everybody else's lives. They make up the rules for everybody else. They are above the law. Okay, and it is very easy to use the Bible to expose that fraud in a courtroom. It's very uncomfortable for them because they have to take judicial notice. You're not making this stuff up. It's truth. It's fact. It's in their rules. It's fact. Okay? In their rules, it's fact. So if you look at this public law, again, it's real short, Public Law 97-280, both houses of this government that is, trying to force its will on everybody, has to acknowledge and does acknowledge that the Bible is the Word of God. Right there in the very first sentence of this resolution. Okay? So God as a creator, creator of something is one with authority over the thing that's created. Okay? Again, people created laws, that are they created governments, and those governments created laws, but those laws are only for corporations because that's the only thing that a government can create. They can create corporations. They set up, individuals between themselves set up trusts. The public trust is a trust, and it has been run like a corporation with limited liability, and it hides behind the fraud at every level. But again, it's people look at it as if it's legitimate, okay? And if you had to ask yourself, the people go, our representatives. Well, let me ask you, has anybody signed a power of attorney over to these people? A single one? Has anybody signed a power of attorney over to these supposed representatives that are supposedly representing you as an individual? Because the last I checked, I didn't sign anything. And nor would I sign a power of attorney over to these people that are they are claiming to be your representatives, and they create these rules in your name, as if you created them, And that, last I checked, I didn't authorize, consent, or ever see a power of attorney contract that I gave over to anybody that calls themselves my representative. So if they're calling themselves my representative and trying to hold me accountable to their rules, it's very easy to show that I am not a party to their rules. They had no power of attorney from me to make rules up for me. Their own rules say them. They say it is in their Constitution. Hey, welcome to the show. Who do we got today?
David.
Hey,
Thanks.
Ted, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Doing good.
Good.
How's your week go?
Oh, not too bad, I guess. Nothing too exciting and nothing too terrible either. So I'm happy.
That's a good thing. That's always a good thing.
Yeah.
So today I'm talking. Doing good. Very busy. I've working on a website that I'm hoping to launch here at the end of next week.
Okay, great.
There'll be a lot of opportunities for education, different things like that. I am working on the trust classes. That's the one part that's going to take a little longer than expected, but everything around the website and the classes is almost done. So
okay,
I'll be probably opening up one class at a time as I complete it, and that'll be. I expect to be very busy here. Coming up here in the next couple of weeks as well, but it's a good thing. A lot of people finding out about living in the private and wanting to do so. But today I was talking about Public Law 97-280. That was a joint resolution that recognizes the Bible as the Word of God. And that means that by having your Bible in court, you can force them to take judicial notice and then use anything in the truth of that Bible to rebut anything that they're saying. If they are saying that you have a duty to obey this or a duty to obey that or pay this fine or do this, that, or the other. You've got the truth that they actually recognize in there. By law, they have to recognize it. And it's accepted as is, so they have to take judicial notice as a fact, everything that's in there. So if you know your word, you can pretty much be able to let them know under no uncertain terms that you are a separate party. You're not a party to the public. So it's very, I also mentioned that the Bible is probably the best private trust ever written between a grantor, God, and us as a steward or trustee of the things that we get in life, and that's private. That's between the parties, between you and God. It's not anybody else's business. It's, the government can't tell you, that you have to do this or you have to do that or boss you around, because your authority doesn't come from, that authority is not over you. That's over corporations. It's very easy to show that separation between the legal fiction and the man or woman, and who created what. You only have authority over what you create, okay? And this trust was created 5,000 years ago, and it's recognized in their courts as per this Public Law 97-280. So as far as a tool to help you win in court, this is a slam dunk. Now it's just going to take some study and opening up that Bible and not just putting your hand on it and, swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, because if you haven't ever opened it, how do you know what the whole truth is? So help you God. And, but if you do know your word, you can go into a courtroom and very easily explain that you're not a party to any of this, and unless you harmed somebody, then, and there's 2 or 3 witnesses that were there when you harmed this person, then it's not a claim. At best, it's a complaint. And then a complaint is whining. There's no evidence. There's no nothing. It's a complaint is administrative. It's ministerial, and you're not allowed to worship at their temple, okay, if you are a believer, if you believe that your creator, it doesn't matter if you believe in the Christian Bible or any other, if you believe in a creator that created you, that wasn't the government, I don't care if you think you created yourself. Regardless, even God, acknowledges free will, doesn't want, to force service, unlike the government. God doesn't force you to pay, unlike the government. The truth will set you free, and the truth in the Bible, every answer to anything that the state brings up in a case, including them claiming that they're your judge. Okay, the prosecutor, who's he representing? Is there a man or a woman that they're representing? No. It's basically barratry. These prosecutors are bringing in cases just to extort people, into their scam and make you pay. You don't have to do that if you can avoid joinder in the courtroom. The only thing they have authority over is the legal name, the fiction, the legal person that was created. Okay? So, and there are ways to get that into a private and get a hold of that so that, even if they try to join you in that route. But if you never set up another trust and you walked in there and you had your Bible in your hand and you knew the Bible, you can set up a defense very, very quick and easy that would, it would stop them in their tracks. They have no authority over you. You didn't sign up. You didn't consent. There is no contract between the parties. Okay, then they have no no right over you. Owner of something, okay? The owner is he who has dominion of a thing, real or personal, corporeal or incorporeal, which he has a right to enjoy and to do with as he pleases, even to spoil or destroy it, as far as the law permits, unless he be prevented by some agreement or covenant which restrains his right. Okay? So that's what's holding you to the public. The properties that you register with them into the public trust, okay, and the contracts you sign for licensing to use those properties, okay, are the agreements and covenants of which this is talking about that restrain your rights in exchange for privileges. So if you don't have these contracts and you collapse the trust in the public and move your property to your management and your self-governance on the private side, you're able to, be out of any of these agreements with the public. You can live your own life free as opposed to dealing with the public on what you can and can't do with your stuff. The right of an owner is more extended than that of him who has only the use of a thing. The owner of an estate may, therefore, change the face of it. He may cut the wood, demolish the buildings, build new ones, dig wherever he may deem proper for minerals, stone, plaster, and similar things. He may commit what he would be considered waste if done by another. The owner continues to have the same right, although he perform no acts of ownership or be disabled from performing them. And although another performs such acts without the knowledge or against the will of the owner, but the owner may lose his right in a thing if he permit it to remain in the possession of a third person. Okay? When you registered your stuff for the last however many years they've been telling you have to register your stuff, okay, they're trying, and they have, ultimately, taken the property, okay? Nobody's ever said anything, okay? But those contracts run out, a lot of them annually or biannually or quarterly, whatever, every 4 years, whatever. This is the definition of owner I'm reading, by the way. So it says here that when there are several joint owners of a thing, as for example of a ship, the majority of them have a right to make contracts in respect of such a thing, in the usual course of business or repair and the like, and the minority will be bound by such contracts. Sounds like the public. That was the fourth definition of owner. And basically, when you are told that, we're towing your car, you were driving your car too fast, is it really your car? Okay. Were you required to drive slower? Did you sign a contract to that effect? And I would say you did, if you have a license and you've registered your property into the public trust. However, the definition of owner is it's yours, okay? You have dominion over the thing, real or personal, corporeal or incorporeal, which he has the right to enjoy and do with as he pleases. Period. You can do with something that you own, okay? That's yours. You control. That's yours. Let me see here. I think there's another definition here. Having the ultimate control and right to use property as long as the law permits, and no agreement or covenant limits rights. One who has the legal title or right to something. One who holds the legal title makes the law over it. That's the owner of a thing. So anything that government is claiming, or the public, you can call them the public or government, if anything they're claiming that they have the right to make rules over, they're holding legal title on. And that means that anything that you think is yours, that you have to, if you're not holding legal title to it, and somebody else has to make the rules and is charging you taxes or fees or fines or anything like that. They're holding legal title. Okay? They have a right to something. Okay? Without legal title, you have no right. Although, that's not true. You would have equitable title. If you're holding equitable title, you have equitable right. Okay? Which includes, which is basically showing the two parties to the trust, two of the three parties to the trust. Okay? You've got the trustee who's holding legal title and the right to something, okay, equitable title, okay. The one who has legal title has the right to it, okay. The one who's holding beneficial title or equitable title has use of it, okay, possession, okay. But possession is, and they say possession is 9/10 of the law. Well, possession does not necessarily make one the owner, okay. It could be in trust or it could be stolen. Okay, it could be entrusted to somebody for beneficial use. And if the trustee is not taking care of it, is not doing what they're supposed to do, and being a good fiduciary, a good steward, a good trustee, then, that's a breach of the trust. And the beneficiary has the right to collapse that trust and demand that property. Okay, become the actual owner, holding both legal and beneficial title. Okay, you're merging the titles into one. They're called owner. So an owner is the one holding legal title and has control over beneficial title, can tell the beneficial user what they can and can't do and how they can and can't use it. Okay, the property or the res or the subject matter of the trust or the property, which is the property itself. Anytime you go into court, they are taking, one, they try to say they have title over you as per the legal person, the legal fiction, the all caps name, and they try to join you to that, to make you a surety for that as a trustee. Okay, they're trying to make you into a trustee by joining yourself to that legal person, and separation from that legal person basically takes away their authority over you. Okay, because the only thing they have authority over is the legal person, and if you become the surety for that legal person, then you are. You're acting as that person's agent. Okay? Actually, even worse, you're acting as that person's, that legal fiction's insurance agent. And you're responsible to pay for any of the damages that legal fiction caused. Being that it's a fiction, it can't cause anything, which is a fraud and a breach of trust to begin with. So it's fraud and it's a breach of trust no matter which way you look at it, which is why I say the best way to get out of issues with dealing with the government, the state, people are looking for all these different remedies, and if you don't like the relationship you're in, the best way to do it as far as government is concerned is a divorce from the government. Force yourself from being governed, period. Nobody can force you to stay in a role, okay, and force you to work as a party in the government, which makes you a slave, okay? And if you're a slave in the public, okay? If you're joined to the legal person at all, you're a slave to the public. The legal person is a slave to the public unless you move that over indentured to the private side, and then it can easily be operated in trust on the private side as opposed to the public side, making that legal person, that legal fiction, your slave to the trust. So if you needed to go out and, get a job and they required a Social Security number in order to get the job, then you can use that Social Security number, provide notice of private trust to the HR department, and basically force them to forego withholding any taxes. Everything that you contract to work for is a private contract between you and the company. You actually don't even need to give a social if you give the right notice. But, if you are in a job that you've been in for a long time and you move to the private side, it wouldn't be a horrible idea to notify HR that, that your income is indentured to a private trust and that the government is no longer entitled to any of it because they're not managing your affairs anymore. You are managing your own affairs, okay? The only reason they continue to manage most people's affairs, okay, is because nobody ever turned up and said, "Hey, I'll take charge of my own affairs now." Okay, at 18, you should have done that. At the age of majority, you should have done that. Most of us didn't, and most people don't, because they're pretty well indoctrinated into the system, and they're told you've got to do this and you've got to ask permission, get a permit to drive when you're 15 or 16 or whatever age it is that they require, and then you've got to get your license, and you can't do this or that, and they tell you that you've got to obey these rules your whole life, never telling you what the rules are or why. Because if you look through their rules, you'll see that none of that's actually true. None of it's required. It's all voluntary, or it's slavery. It can't be both. It cannot be both. You cannot, they can't force you to do it, and that's what they're doing. Again, it's one thing, if a bunch of cops came up and they were dressed in black and had ski masks on, what's the difference if you're the one getting assaulted, robbed? And that's what's going on, and it is done by force. It's not done voluntarily. But when you go to, you provide them the right notice, you go to court, and you can explain very easily that you are not a party to the public. Therefore, I didn't invite you into my life. You didn't see me actually commit a crime where I harmed somebody. Therefore, we've got nothing to discuss. My business is my private business. You go about public business. That's, you've got to know where your authority comes from. And it is about taking responsibility for your actions and for, handling your business. Otherwise, it's the state handling your business, and that's what they're doing when they're administering your affairs. When you go into an administrative courtroom, they are administering your affairs. They're administering your estate. They're telling you you were a bad little boy or girl and you didn't obey, the parent state and all these criminals running it, and now we're going to charge you as if you were you had a fiduciary responsibility. They tie you to that trust and joined her as a trustee instead of a beneficiary. Okay. If you look at that birth certificate as for what it is, it's a unit of beneficial interest in the public trust. Okay. Anyway, I've been talking for about a half hour. Does anybody have any questions? And I heard a few people hop on the call. No questions? Well, we'll make an announcement in about a half hour or so. I'm expecting Kelby Smith from his advocates to come on the show. We'll probably be discussing a similar topic here, and Kelby's been doing this for a long time. I'm not exactly sure how long, but we'll find that out when he comes on the show. Looking forward to having him. I've seen quite a few of his videos that he has on YouTube, and his website is hisadvocates.org. So should be a good show between 6 and 7, and then we'll have questions after that. But so as far as going back to this public law and the Bible. It's I only heard about this public law recently, a few weeks ago, and I never knew that it was officially recognized as the Word of God, and written in law, in their laws. But that's huge for any defense that you're going to come across in the public, if you are, whether or not you have a private trust estate set up and you've been in the private, you don't even need any of that if you can go in there with the Bible. You are, Bible says you are free indeed, Okay. The tax and the fines and the charges that you've harmed the state in some way, shape, or form disappear. You're not, those are not your laws any more than they are the Queen. If she were to come over here, you're not going to tell her what she can and can't. You know what I mean? So you're going to have to leave. Ridiculous. But last I checked, I mean, this is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. I think that includes it. So, for hot dog national. Answer to a higher. Well, when you go in with your Bible, so do you. When you go into that court, you answer to a higher authority. Okay? Own law recognizes it in law. So when you do, you provide judicial notice. Okay? Judicial notice is they have to take notice, okay? And it is as a fact. It's unrebuttable. It is not unrebuttable. So when you bring it up, they have to take notice, even if they don't want to. Even if they don't want to. For crying out loud, I'm having problems with my phone here. Somebody speak up, just let me know you're there. Okay. I'm going to assume that everybody's there and I'm being heard. But, judicial notice, they have to take notice. It's in their rules, okay? It is a rule in the law of evidence that allows a fact to be introduced into evidence if the truth of the fact is so notorious or well-known or so authoritatively attested that it cannot reasonably be doubted. This is done upon the request of a party seeking to rely on the fact at issue. Okay? That's judicial notice. Okay? I'll read it again because it's, here's a remedy in judicial notice. It's a rule in the law of evidence that allows a fact to be introduced into evidence if the truth of that fact is so notorious or well-known or so authoritatively attested that it cannot reasonably be doubted. This is done upon the request of the party seeking to rely on the fact at issue. So if you're going to rely on the Bible, you give them judicial notice. They cannot deny or rebut the facts that you're going to enter into evidence, okay, the truth that you're going to enter into evidence, okay. James 4:12, there's only one lawgiver and one judge. Who are you to judge your neighbor, right? I mean, one lawgiver. Last time I checked, the public's got a whole bunch of lawgivers. If there's only one, somebody's a fraud. Let's see if they have power of attorney to represent you. Well, if they don't, okay, they've just committed fraud. They're acting in fraud. Okay, you've just easily explained the fraud using one verse. There's a judge standing up there telling you got to do what they say. Make them walk on water. Turn your water into wine. Do something. Prove that they are that one lawgiver and one judge. If they're not, they are acting fraud over you. If their own Constitution says that all men are created equal, okay, and then they're standing there above you, not acting very equal, okay, all of them, in judgment of you. Now, again, if you've harmed somebody, be responsible. It's your duty to be responsible. Being responsible is the only way you're going to be able to live in the private. Okay, taking responsibility for your own actions, for your own business, for your own life, and those that you've been entrusted with. You're responsible. You don't need somebody else to tell you what to do, how to do it. You don't need representatives making up rules for you to live by. Okay, and it is very much about managing your own, governing your own life, and their own constitution. They tell you just about every constitution in this country is says that you have the right to self-govern, and they're telling you. Okay, they just don't show you how. Okay, and they don't show you how out of the system because it's a coveted, secret between them, willing to let their slave. Last time I checked, it said if you're free in Yeshua, you're free indeed. Well, if I'm free and I got to listen to these guys make up ridiculous rules so that they can live in mansions, that just doesn't seem very free to me. Okay, so it's missing somewhere some truth. I think it's not quite a truth. Okay, and the truth will set you free. You expose it. When somebody turns around and, well, I arrested him and I brought him to jail. Sounds legitimate to me, huh? No. I was kidnapped at gunpoint by half a dozen people and a dog against my will and by force and threats of force. And I was kidnapped and held in a cage for ransom. I wasn't arrested and put in jail. Kidnapped. Unless I've harmed somebody, I shouldn't be there, and neither should you. You're not animals. You have dominion. You have authority. But if you don't take that authority and live and walk in that authority, if you are living in fear of what these public servants are going to do to you if you don't obey them, that's not freedom. That's not life. That's slavery. 100% slavery. I don't care how you try to justify it to yourself. There's nothing legitimate about it. And when you go to the court, oh, you didn't buy my license and you didn't entrust me with your property? How dare you, not bow down and pay Caesar his due? And that's a personal choice, okay? If that's what you really, really want to do, you want to have these people running and telling you what to do, go ahead, fill out contracts, apply, beg, that these people fix your life and manage your life. If you want to live free and private and, peacefully, deciding what you do and what you do not do, and for whom, that's your choice, and that's obvious. It should be obvious. But when people walk into court, they go, they bow down into these people and they shudder and their legs quake and they're afraid. And that's a learned response. They've been teaching you it since you were born. Follow orders, do this, raise your hand, ask permission. you get like Indian boys that were, kids, took responsibility for their actions. They became responsible for themselves. They go out, they would perform an act of manhood thing, something that would recognize them as being able to choose for themselves. Okay, in Judaism, same thing. You've got a bar mitzvah and a bat mitzvah. You reach an age of maturity where you can start having some, decision making. Okay, and it was done from the family, not from the courts, not from Washington telling you what you can and can't do. Okay, as adults, last I checked, as an adult, somebody who is able to handle their own affairs, manage their own affairs, being able to walk in an authority, as an authority, as a man or a woman, a responsible man or woman. But there's authority in that. Okay, it's a much higher status, recognized by public law 97-280, that a man, okay, is a higher status, has a higher status than government. Okay, higher status than a person or a citizen. If you look in the Bible, and I know many people think that that claim to be believers and read the Bible or should be reading the Bible, they are, they overlook the fact that it says you are not a citizen of this planet. You're or not of this planet, but you are a citizen of heaven, is what it says in the Bible. Well, if you're a citizen of heaven, then your rules are heaven's rules, not man's rules. Okay, and nowhere in there does it give man the right to make up rules for other men or women. We were to have dominion over the animals and the land and, birds and things like that, and ourselves and our children for a time. Okay? And even then, they become unruly. And and rightfully so, because they're coming into their own. Anybody's raising kids or has raised kids, they get into those teens and they start to pull away. They need you less and less. And that's the way it's supposed to be, because they are coming into their own authority. They get to choose and make decisions for themselves. But if you do not separate yourself from the public, you're allowing them to still rule you. Okay? And every one of us as adults should be unrulable by anybody but our own conscience. Now, if you're running around harming people, it's a whole different story. Nobody's allowed, that's not right. You can do what you want to yourself, but anybody else's, you have no right to tell people what they can and can't do unless it harms somebody else, period. The Bible says that you fulfilled the entire law if you love your neighbor. Super simple. How many laws are in the books of the government and the public that they expect you to know? Meanwhile, I can guarantee you that the judge, the prosecutor, the cop that pulled you over, none of them know those laws. None of them. Not a single one of them know the laws. All of them. Nobody does. You have to really sit there and I'm talking know them. You'd have to study them. You'd have to research them to know them. And they write new ones every day, because every single new law is a new charge. It's a new fee to extort you with. Okay? Well, if they're not, you're paying these fees for their service. Their service is trustees, and nobody's holding them responsible as trustees. If you and not only that, people are standing around thinking it's legitimate that people with guns come and tell you what you can and can't do, because some other guy who is not following those rules, they're just making them up, is acting as if they are God, obviously, because there's only one lawgiver and one judge based on public law 97-280. Okay, and you make sure they take judicial notice of it. and you can stand on that. Okay? Who was it here? Jackson, President Jackson, said it's the rock on which your republic stands. Okay? If you want to stand on a republic, then you're going to, that republic isn't there. It's the individual private relationship between man or woman and their creator. And that's the authority. It goes from God to you. You have authority over yourself, your creator, and then you. Okay? Unless you, by contract, give that away to somebody, okay, like who? The public. You go in and you register your stuff and you beg for licenses, applying. If you look up the word apply, it means to beg. Okay? So you're begging for permission to use your own stuff that they forced you to give them. That wouldn't hold up if they didn't call themselves government. They wouldn't hold up one bit if they pulled in a mob boss and said the same exact thing. Okay? It sounds ridiculous. So you're not required, okay, to obey anybody. You're a grown man or a grown woman. If you've reached the age of majority, when I was a kid, I remember, cops couldn't, if you weren't the age of majority in New York, it was 18. They had to bring you to your parents. They could not take you to jail. They couldn't, because they don't have the authority to do that. The parents are over the child, and the government has no authority over them. Well, it's gotten more and more criminal because, wow, you got all these children who have not reached the age of majority yet that we can charge their parents for their misconduct. We can find new ways to charge and extort the people whose property we're supposed to be being entrusted with and being good stewards over. And instead, they con you to become a trustee as well when you go into court by joining you to the legal fiction. Excuse me. Does anybody have any questions? I've heard a few people jump on the line. Happy to answer any questions before Kelby gets on here. I don't know if he's arrived yet. But if I have no questions, then I am going to take a minute and something to drink here, and I will be right back. Thanks for joining me. This is How to Win in Court Without a Liar. I'm Dave Horowitz, and today we're speaking about Public Law 97-280 and how the truth will set you free. Hold on, I will be back in a moment. Hey, welcome back. This is Dave Horowitz. This is How to Win in Court Without a Liar. I was just checking to see if Kelby would be getting on the call. Should be here in the next couple minutes. Today, been talking about Public Law 97-280, which recognizes the Bible is a law, federal law, House Joint Resolution, and it is recognizing the Bible as the Word of God. So, very, very powerful and interesting remedy to dealing with the courts. Again, this is, I wanted to ask if anybody had any questions or on how to maybe use this in court, how you would go about using the Bible in court, some positions you may take in dealing with, dealing with the public, utilizing the Bible. Happy to answer any of those questions. We've just got somebody on the line here. Kelby, is that you?
Yeah, I'm on.
Hey, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I just want to first say thank you for stepping out and speaking the truth to people. And my name is Kelby. I'm executive director for His Advocates. I'm a licensed real estate broker, or I hold a license in my pocket that says I'm a real estate broker, and I've done thousands of loan transactions in my life, which stopped in 2008. I've probably had a little over 1,000 employees. I've managed medium-sized companies and built my own companies my whole life. I was basically awakened in 2008 and realized what we truly are dealing with in this world, and I've been studying law pretty much ever since. And God's really kind of just put it on my heart that I need to figure out and teach how to free the people, and that's what I'm doing.
I appreciate that, and I'm sure a lot of others do as well. This is, you and I are a lot alike. Our backgrounds are actually quite a lot alike as well. I've been a business consultant for the last 17 years. Did a lot of corporate finance. Spent probably the last 9 out of 17 years doing full business consulting with a major focus on funding and finance. And I got, probably as you did as well, tired of making debt slaves.
Right.
And, the debtor is slave to the creditor. And I couldn't do it anymore. Not like that.
Right. Totally agree.
Doing it on the private side and dealing with real assets instead of fiats, and using those for just very short periods of time for specific purposes. And that's to, get value out of the system and put it private, And
right.
From what I've seen on your website, you do similar things. So,
well, it's important for people to understand that there absolutely is a difference in law of what we have here in this nation as what's known as an American, and then what's known as an employee of the United States Corporation, which is a United States citizen. First off, if I'm able to do just a small bit of teaching,
please do.
My first goal I'm trying to help people to understand is how they think and what they're thinking about as being they always, I'm watching the different blogs and different things on Facebook, and people are always starting off with we're slaves in this nation, we are this, we're that, and the other. And I want to stress to people that you're all born equally under God. And just because your parents unknowingly pledged you as the surety by creating a live-born record, and then putting and the state putting that live-born record into the form of a birth certificate, doesn't necessarily make you a bastard of the state, doesn't necessarily make you a slave in the system. It's your own ignorance of the law and adhesion contracts, which is kind of the unfortunately the catalyst of fraud that people are starting to wake up to, where in these adhesion contracts you're not realizing you're stepping out of your God-given unalienable right to be under the Creator of the Most High as a state of being. And that's really what a state of the Union citizen is. And I want to explain this real quick. When you look up in Black's Law the word state, lowercase, the definition is a body politic of people. Now, I'm not saying that's the definition of state. I'm saying that's what they say it is, defined in their case sites. That's their law. So they're admitting to it being a state of being, because a body politic of people doesn't mean a region. It doesn't mean a territory. It means a body politic of people. So you're dealing with that first word, lowercase state, as being a state of being. Then you have the all caps definition of state, and that is a community of persons bound by federal territory. And so there's a little bit more to that, but in a nutshell, what we're born with is freedom under God, and what we choose to do, starting by our parents, giving the elements of our quote-unquote lives, which they're not, but the world seems to think they are, giving the elements of their life over to the state, and they're actually giving the equivalent and a manifest on a live born record, which really the live born record is kind of like your title. Like when you buy a truck from the dealer, if you're able to get the manufacturer's statement of origin from the manufacturer, from Ford, now you're holding the true title to a quote-unquote car or truck. Now, when a hospital gives that live born record to a mom, it's nothing more than a record of a transaction that took place at a certain time, date, and what the weight was and all that. And so what happens, unfortunately, is the mom is the record, is creating the record, and on the birth live born record, she's saying that she is the mother, and she's putting down the father's information right on the top of the record. And then you go down to the signature portion of the record, and it says informant, and it says parent. So she's agreeing by putting her signature. It also says the word signature. Signature means one who can basically confirm to the validity of the instrument. So she's creating an instrument. If you look up in Uniform Commercial Code 9, where it deals with instruments, you're creating an instrument that basically in the future is going to be traded on Wall Street. So she's first a mom on the top, then she, on the signature line, admits to and agrees with that she's creating an instrument, and it says the word informant, and it says the word parent. Parent means, in their law, judicially decreed guardian, and it means one who turns one over. So the mom is one who turns one over as the judicially decreed guardian, and attesting to the validity of the instrument by signing it. And then the state then puts it on 32-pound watermark banknote paper and puts a QSIP number on it and puts a Social Security number attached to it, and then literally puts it on Wall Street. Now it's become a birth certificate. Now when you look up the definition of certificate, you start dealing in the instrument world, and I'm not going to get in going down that path. But my point for saying this is, you, as a living man or woman, are not that birth certificate. That birth certificate is the United States citizen. It is the office that is what you will attest to hold. You will hold that office of that artificial person. So
it's an actual office. It's an actual office. There is an actual office of person.
Yes,
it's an official office called person. Google it. You'll see some interesting stuff.
So when you're holding that office, you have a responsibility and duty as the position holder, and now collateral for that person. And you're constantly saying you are that person. You go down to the county recorder. They'll ask you, who is it that's asking for this birth certificate? And one of the questions that you can sign for is, I am someone other than that person, or I am that person. So you start admitting to get you to think you are that person up front when you're ordering certified copies of that birth certificate. And you take that birth certificate down to the DMV, and the DMV has all this language and all their fine print in their contract, and you're agreeing to all these things within the Department of Motor Vehicles that is also helping you to step into that office of that person. Not just that, but you're agreeing to all kinds of terms and quote-unquote privileges that were once rights. Now you're agreeing that they are privileges, and you're agreeing that you're a commercial paid for
fiduciary.
driver.
You're a fiduciary.
Correct.
You're becoming a trustee as well as a fiduciary,
which makes you the liability and makes you the collateral. Yes,
you're the liable party. Yes,
correct. And so the goal is to first understand that a corporation cannot do business with a living man or woman. You will find nowhere in code, statute, at law, anywhere, positive law, ordinance, case sites where it's talking about the United States corporation creating law for a man or a woman. It doesn't do it. So it can only create law. Now look up the word identity. Like, this is why they created the words, and these are patents, guys. Patents are the highest form of law in our land. This is what they do. They create the processes. They make the patents. The word identity means where two or more things are operating as one. The birth certificate is a thing. The man is a thing. Operating as one, creating the identity. So now you have a driver's license known as an identity in your wallet. You're holding the office of the person, and you have a responsibility to make sure that office is held properly by dealing properly with the terms of services for the driver's license, by dealing properly with the terms of services for sending mail, by dealing properly with the terms of services for a passport, for any of these things that you're doing in holding that office. And so this is not a typical understanding of who you are. So when you finally get your mind wrapped around, hey, wait a minute, I'm not that artificial person. I'm not that U.S. citizen. I'm a man, or I'm a woman, and I have a right under God to be free and to be self-governed, which our pastors, our television, everybody is training us to be something different than we think, than we really truly are. They're trying to help you to think that you are a quote-unquote slave under the corporation. But if you understand Rundle versus Delaware, a corporation can't do business with a living man, so they have to create this artificial person and make you think you're synonymous with that person. So they make the artificial person with an office, then you pledge to hold that office and do the responsibilities of that office and hold all the statutes, codes, and ordinances of that office up properly, or you're going to become, or your name is going to appear on a charge instrument, and you're going to think that's you. And that's why they always ask, is that you? And do you understand the charges that have been presented to you? And you're like, yep, I do. Do you plead guilty, not guilty, or nolo contendere? I plead not guilty. You're pleading for the office of that person. That person is the one that gets incarcerated, and unfortunately, because you say that you're the office holder, you're the liability, and you're going to be incarcerated. So this isn't rocket science, but this is a different perspective and way of thinking. And so when people are arguing that we're born slaves, no, you're not. You have all the God-given unalienable rights. The problem is you have a ton of signatures everywhere that say you want to contract for a lesser value as a corporate surety for a corporation named the United States, which is masquerading as the United States of America. It's not the same in law. There's multiple definitions of the United States. And if you really want to understand who you are, is
Hello? Kelby, did we lose you? Hello?
Take his phone on that.
Yeah, I think he dropped off. I think he might have lost his signal. Hopefully he'll hop back on. While we're waiting, Does anybody have any questions on some of the stuff that he was covering? No questions tonight.
See, David, I have a quick one.
Sure.
So with what Kelby was saying, I'm assuming he's going to say you have to rescind contracts. But that's basically also the same thing that you're saying with, losing their trust and lack of trust in them, correct?
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, Kelby, you did get back on?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. Just lost you there.
That's okay. No problem. Go ahead, Chad, you were having a question. If you want to relay it to Kelby, that would work.
Yeah, please.
Oh, okay. Hey, Kelby, it's Chad. We've spoken before, actually. When you were off, I was talking to David, and I just said I kind of assume you're going to say that with all the contracts we have to get those rescinded. And David kind of says the same thing in my way of thinking, that it's basically they're doing a breach of trust, and you give them a notice of no trust in them anymore to rescind those. Is that correct?
Well, what I do is when you understand the element of the agreement, so in an agreement, what are the elements of the agreement? Offer, acceptance, consideration, performance, and full disclosure. That's a contract. These are trusts, okay? But trusts operate almost the same as contracts from a standpoint if there isn't full disclosure or if there's fraud in the factum, fraud from the beginning. And there's absolutely all of the above when you're creating that SS5, the Social Security contract, when you're creating the driver's license agreement. You're never getting a countersigned agreement. So you're creating a trust, all right? And so when you're operating that trust and you're holding the office of the trust, you never got full disclosure of what was going to happen to you as the liability. You never were told that you were, all these different things. So what we do is we break the contract by removing our signature for fraud in the factum, and we pull it off a number of different ways. But the contract truly they're not giving a driver's license to a man because they can't. Now listen really carefully right now. Please understand what I'm saying. They cannot give a contract to a man, meaning that you're not holding a driver's license that you were contracted with the state. You're holding an office, and that office is holding a driver's license contract with the state. You're the responsible party. You're putting your signature on an application, and you're becoming the trustee or the liability of that trust. So what you do is you remove your signature as the trustee. You remove your signature as the liability, and then you accept and hold, like for the driver's license, and I'll explain the Social Security in a sec. You accept and hold that license in your pocket for the registered organization, but with no contract with you as a living man. But all terms of that agreement do apply for that registered organization, except you're telling them you've stepped out of the office. This is important to understand. It holds the contract together for the registered organization, pivots you from the trustee to the beneficiary, and also allows for you to keep that license in your pocket and not operate as a quote-unquote sovereign citizen where you're burning your driver's license and have and growing your beard and living in a tent in the wilderness. We have to be wise as serpents and soft as doves, and that means we need to be smarter. They want to play the flipping game. If they want to issue a driver's license to an artificial person, let's call them out on that. Fine, the artificial person will retain the driver's license, but we're pivoting from the trustee to the beneficiary. And we're going to continue to hold that license in our pocket with no contract as a man. And so that's how we operate that particular removal of signature for the driver's license, and it's very similar for the Social Security. People say, do I lose my benefits as a Social Security? I say you never had any benefits. Your sweat equity as a man built up benefits for a registered organization. So switch from the trustee to the beneficiary and continue to receive the benefits, but throw them into a foundation account to where, and also obviously do the same or similar approach that you did on the driver's license, where you cancel the Social Security contract in its entirety. But you have no control of whether that Social Security is going to get canceled for the birth certificate. But you can, under their own statute, and I point this out in my training videos, keep the benefit of the retirement because it was your sweat equity that did it. But that benefit is going to the registered organization. It's not going to you as the living man. So how you structure up the removal of your signatures and move yourself from the position of trustee to beneficiary, and don't let the money come into the registered organization, but let it come into a foundation. You're creating no further agreements. Does that make any sense to you? And if it doesn't, I'll try to do better to explain it.
Yes, it did to me. Thank you.
I'd like to add something to that,
Please.
if you don't mind, Kelby. And again, I set up trusts a couple of different ways, and depending on the intent of the man or woman and where they want to take this, you have a choice, and you can operate the legal fiction out of a private trust organization, and I suggest that, when I structure a trust like that, I make a business trust the beneficiary and the trustee, unless there's a management trust, it'll be a trustee over multiple. But you can do it that way, and again, use the benefits. Be able to notify if you're working on the books, the HR department, and let them know no more withholding. Everything that's been contracted goes to the trust, releasing any tax liability or tax burden. But there is a second way, and that is collapsing the entire trust. Basically, and that it would basically mean that the legal person would be, for all intents and purposes, dead, like death certificate dead. Because that's the only thing that kills that corporation or that trust. But with that, the beneficiary, which is still the live man or woman, gets the benefits and any assets. When a trust collapses, the trust assets that were being held in trust for the beneficiary gets released to the beneficiary. So a breach of trust for fraud or anything like that, no longer any trust in that system. You can collapse it. You can demand a full accounting, and they do have to provide you a full accounting as well as the properties that were held, including any gains received from them. And until they pay it back, it is under compound interest. And that's trust law. So you do have that option as well. But then you cannot use that birth certificate or that legal person for anything at all. You have to operate 100% as a private man or woman.
Yeah.
So well, there is that ability to do that as well.
There's always multiple ways. Yeah, there's always multiple ways to bring in what you're trying to get accomplished, and you just gave another solution. So appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what you're teaching. So I'm not going to hold you up. Keep going.
Well, thank you. How many people are in your mind understanding that they are not the artificial person?
In my mind?
Yeah, like out there. I mean, people that are just coming into knowledge of a state citizen. I mean, how many people are out there are still sitting there thinking that they are that registered organization? That's a confusing question.
Right, that they're their ID, that they're the name that's called when the judge calls it. Tons. Go sit in the courtroom for a day. You'll see hundreds of them, thousands of them rolling through there. Yeah. And there's no reason there's no reason to, act as one of the pieces of chattel that are, or the cattle going through the, to the slaughter there. From the private, if you're operating properly, I think, and once somebody comes to this, realization that, well, there's two different entities here. There's me, and then there's this fiction, masquerading as me. And I personally, I think that'd be one of the first things that people should learn about, being, separating them from the system itself. What I find, though, is that most people coming into, waking up is financial. They're figuring out the money is fake, that something's squirrely, that it's being created out of thin air. And I find that most people come into either that or they're having a serious issue in court, or any issue in court. They're just, they got steamrolled because they didn't know what they were, that they were.
So, what amazes me sometimes is when you hear from people that they still believe the Federal Reserve is a part of the country, and getting their mind wrapped around that one component of fraud where, December 24th, 1911, where they were creating the Federal Reserve Act, and you had a secret, basically, hey, let's wait till Christmas time and let's bring in 3 people to have a quorum, and create that 2 out of 3, people. And that's what happened. 2 people voted for the Federal Reserve, and it never got ratified by the governors. And basically,
2 or 3 witnesses. It's kind of a thing was established. That was it.
Yeah, that was a quorum. That was the majority at the time. So I just find it interesting that we're still at this point of waking up people, and but I really appreciate the fact that. It's and I haven't had the time to really watch the impeachment of President Trump, but what I find amusing is the level of how bad off our nation is from a corporation standpoint. Who these goons that are sitting in these positions and what they're allowing to come out of their mouth. It's just amazing we've hit new lows in the last couple of years.
Oh, it's been going on for a long, long time, I think. And the last, watching the circus, because pretty much that's all it is. It's a circus. It's a fraud. And, my personal beliefs, and anybody that's listened to me before knows that I'm a political atheist. I don't believe in the divine right of kings, queens, politicians, judges, cops, or lawyers. Anybody who would stand above somebody else and tell them that they have a right to make up rules and tell them what to do is beyond my comprehension of legitimacy. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's about as illegitimate as it gets.
Right.
Like I was saying earlier, before you came on the show, excuse me, that when these people are masquerading, there is a fraud, a huge fraud, and they're masquerading as your representatives, as your lawgiver, as your judge. And
right.
We started the conversation. You weren't on the first hour, but I was talking about Public Law 97-280, and that is a House Joint Resolution. Excuse me. That the Bible is the Word of God. There is no better remedy in that courtroom. That's a private trust, the ultimate private trust between a man or woman and their Creator. Cannot be violated, and they're recognizing it in their law. So it can be judicially recognized, judicially notified. They can be judicially notified that you're entering the Word as evidence. You're going to open up truth into their world of fiction, which really stirs things up a lot. They do not like it when you ask them to walk on water. I've done it. I've done it, but with a room full of witnesses, and what can they say? They can't hold you in contempt. They can't, because you're asking a question. You're claiming to be my judge. You're making this claim, and you open your Bible and James 4:12. There's only one lawgiver and one judge. Who are you to judge your neighbor?
Right.
Are you that one? Without a power of attorney, who's representing me? If you own yourself, which you should, okay, or if you are indentured to God because you were bought with a price, right? There's, you're either serving one master or the other, but you're not allowed to serve two. And they're claiming to, claiming to rule over you and make these rules over man, because they're not telling you that there's these two offices, two statuses, or an office person that they're trying to, that they put you in, and then you're standing as a man or a woman. They're not telling you this stuff. So that's not full disclosure. Voids out everything they're doing. Sorry, I don't want to steal your spotlight here, Kelby. Go ahead.
No spotlight. All good. I appreciate it. I'm a learner. I don't try to be I try to be a learner more than a teacher, but sometimes if you get one nugget a day, you're truly blessed. So I'm always listening to people, just trying to learn. But we're one of the hardest parts about what people keep talking about is these adhesion contracts, and we probably need to shift that to adhesion trust, and help people to understand what they're walking into truly in law as creating the highest form of law in the land, which is that trust, but allowing for them to operate the trust on our behalf, and us operating it as the office holder versus the beneficiary, because they're currently in that beneficiary status and receiving all the benefits of the bonds that they have created. I don't know about you guys, but I looked at my Social Security number online, and I was able to determine a value, and I'm amazed at what these guys are generating for themselves, and how they're stealing money from the states, and why they had to make the Trading with the Enemy Act and the Emergency War Powers Act, and making the United States citizen an enemy combatant and belligerent in law, and then also calling them so much as an animal in law. And it's when you start to realize what they think of you and how they treat you, being that we have more people in prison in this nation than anywhere else on the face of the earth.
Why would you trust them?
Right.
That show was 2 weeks ago. Mother, should I trust the government?
Yeah. So when you think about how we have come about in this nation to we still have America. We still have, and I believe honestly, when you look at the federal rules of regulations and you look at maybe Title 51 sections, or Title 31 sections 51.1 and 51.2, you will find that there is a de jure explanation for an office and a de facto explanation for an office, for the office of the Treasury Secretary in that particular title. And so they've built into the federal rules of regulations how to operate both the de jure capacity and the de facto capacity. So a judge has the same responsibility. You're walking into that court, they're going to try to play you like an administrative procedure, but you can invoke that oath of office. But are you a U.S. citizen or are you a state citizen? So if you're a state citizen, you invoke the oath of office, you bring your proofs up, and you file your counterclaim, and and they have to start operating on your behalf as a non-biased third neutral party in the matter, and the state needs to really reconsider their charge instrument. Does it apply to you as a real man or a real woman? And the answer is no, it doesn't, and it should be dismissed. And when you start thinking about that in that realm where every office, that courtroom could be a private bar venue, or it could be it can be an actual, in California, Article 6 court or an Article 3 federal court. You can invoke that. And I've seen judges, I've had people invoke the oath of office, and the plaintiff or the prosecutor is going off on the judge, and the just says, excuse me. I literally heard a prosecuting attorney say, Your Honor, this is a private bar venue. That's what taught that.
It's funny when they have those little fraudulent slips, right?
Yeah, the Freudian slip about 4 years ago. I was in court, and I dropped my jaw, and it dawned on me, wait a minute, we create the jurisdiction when we walk in. If we're walking in and agreeing to everything, the jurisdiction that they're playing and the flags that they're flying, then that's what we're going to do. But if we walk in and we invoke that oath of office and we agree with only the jurisdiction of an Article 6 or federal Article 3, and that judge needs to operate in a certain standard, and you counterclaim these guys and you rebut the presumption of jurisdiction for what the charge instrument that they're saying, because it doesn't apply to you. I've seen the judge look at the guy and say, I'm sorry, that does not apply today. And I've seen the prosecutor be infuriated and smack his hand down today, or on that bench, and I've seen the anger start rolling out. It's amazing.
It's because they have to pay.
Yeah,
they have to pay if they bring it and they screw it up like that. So they either have to dismiss, drop charges, not even dismiss. They have to drop the charges, or they have to pay.
Right.
Unless they can produce some witnesses and some facts and evidence, they have to. And they can't provide any of that. I tried. My little thing is I prefer to bring my Bible as the only law that I bring in there, and
that's your law.
My jurisdiction. What's that?
That's your law.
That's my law, and that's my jurisdiction, and I bring that with me, with whether I have the Bible in my hand or it's in my in my heart and my mind. I still bring it with me. And I only question authority, because if you rebut the presumption, you're flipping the burden of proof over to yourself.
Right.
So why rebut it? Just question them until they admit they're a fraud. If they stop answering questions and go, listen, we don't want, this getting out, there's too many people here, they're going to dismiss the case. They don't want you to teach a room full of people that are about to pay them. When you start questioning and asking the right questions, it's funny because I have a little fraudulent slip that I had with the last attorney that I was dealing with, who was the third prosecutor they assigned to my case. She was fresh out of law school, and I asked her, I said, literally the day before court or 2 days before court, I met her at the pretrial. I said, can we go out in the hall? I'd like to know what the state wants from me. And so I said, she goes, well, $1,800. I said, well, that's not going to happen. So we don't have a deal there. I said, what makes you think that the rules of the state of Montana, its constitution, its statutes, laws, codes, and ordinances pertain to me? She goes, oh, that's easy. The social contract. I said, fantastic. I need a copy with my signed signature. But I couldn't believe she said it. That's what they teach coming out of law school, that a social contract is what binds you to these laws. And it doesn't exist. Right. At worst, it's a horrible theory.
Yeah. Hey, David, what can we do about having maybe me on next Sunday as well, so we can get a little bit further into this. I was expecting tonight, but I didn't see an email from you, and I actually have a bunch of guests over at my house right now, and they're laughing at me because I'm trying to hold this show with you and at the same time be a host. What would you say about me coming back on next Sunday at the same time and maybe doing a full hour on court procedure and different elements of how to become a state citizen and how to understand that birth certificate?
Sounds good. I think it's so. I appreciate you coming on for the time that you did today. And next week.
Yeah,
next week sounds good. If you want to reach out to me, we could maybe discuss a few topics and during the week, and then we'll set it up for next Sunday again.
Absolutely. You guys be blessed, and I'll see you next Sunday. Appreciate you, David.
Thank you, Kelby. Have a great night.
Yeah. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So let's we can move into some questions, or if anybody has any legal issues they're dealing with right now and may need some some help with that, or have some questions on your own particular situation or a topic of law, or please bring forth your questions, and we can this is usually a good time of the show, a good part of the show, because people get a lot out of I get a lot of response from the archives, the recordings that I post, that people are getting a lot out of the question and answers because they're dealing with a lot of the same issues. So, if you are having an issue in the courts, whether that be, traffic issue, or if you're dealing with IRS issues, or I know a lot of people have been losing homes to fraudulent counties and states and lenders, issues with divorce and child custody issues, dealing with CPS, anything like that. If you've got questions, now's a good time. Anybody? Just speak up. No reason to be shy here. Nothing? All right. Well, I'm sorry, Kelby had to leave. We was on a really good topic there, and dealing with the courts. And again, there's tons of different ways to deal with the courts, and the direction that Kelby was going in with what he was teaching is dealing from the private side, indenturing the legal person into a private trust organization, to get control over that. And the man or woman whose legal fiction it is should not be the trustee over that account directly. There should be a layer or so of separation between the two. Because then there's absolutely no question that the legal person is not the man or the woman. Okay, that's my view of this, because I'm a firm believer in multiple layers of protection, not putting all of your eggs in one basket, limiting liability across the board on the private side, and also in generating a game plan for defending yourself while you're operating from the private side. So, but that's the direction we're moving in. That Kelby was moving in what he was discussing. On another note, I do want to say that probably by next Friday, going to be launching a new website and the trust course will be soon to follow. I will be opening those up as I complete them. There'll be 3 separate courses. One is going to be establishing your trust estate. Second is administering your trust estate. And third is defending your trust estate. They're going to be 8-week courses, 6 months in total over the 3 different courses. And basically 5 days a week with a 100-question test at the end of each week to to be able to go over and see where your knowledge is going. Nice thing about the on the website as well, I'm putting a ton of my own personal library into the library, the self-help library that'll be on the site. So there's going to be hundreds of resources, including the constitutions and statutes and codes for each state are all on there. Got a bunch of the Black's Law dictionaries and lots of works on trust, on administrative law, on all different types of law. Eventually there'll be, and that library will grow. I'll be adding to it. Just not enough time in the day to go through all of the documents and books that I've had on PDF that over the years. So I am loading them on there though, and those will be available to members on the site. There'll be a document templates as well for certain members on the site, and there'll be training, and we will be able to help people and help guide people into a life on the private side. And that's really, it's that separation that is going to help you to deal with any court situation you may or may not have down the road, and that includes anything that has anything to do with any of your personal or estate assets. So if you are, if there's a subject matter of the court is your vehicle, which you own, okay, which is owned in trust for you, the owner holds legal title. I was explaining that earlier in the show. Owner holds legal title. Owner makes the rules for the thing owned, okay? So if you have things that are registered into the public and you still think you own them, you may want to check the definition of ownership, because you're not able to make up those rules for your property if it is registered in the public. So if you're, if you are registering your vehicle into the public, you are putting it in the public's trust. The trustee and the trust hold legal title. That means they make up the rules, not you, and that they are the owner. The trustee is the owner of the, now it's owned by the trustee and managed by the trustee for the benefit of the beneficiary. So if in the public, they are, and this goes back to, what Kelby was talking about earlier, on the public side, you can collapse any of these trusts, especially ones that hold property like your vehicle or your home. I've got a neighbor who's, his family's probably owned most of the surrounding properties here for the last couple hundred years, where I am in Montana, and his property is owned in trust. He does not pay taxes. He does not have any covenants with the state or the county or the city. So they cannot tell him what he can or can't do, what he can or can't build, how high he can pile his trash. He could do whatever he wants. It's his property. He owns it, and he's trustee over it on the private side. And it's the same for anybody who's really looking to have a true remedy when it comes to dealing with the courts. You come from, if you're on the public side, okay, they look at you as the legal fiction, okay, the legal person. They don't they make no distinction between you and the legal person. That's on purpose to try and get you to join yourself to it, okay, and become a fiduciary over it, a trustee, that, with liability for the stock. okay? But you're still not making the rules. If you were a fiduciary over it, you should be able to make the rules over what you can and can't do, regardless if you registered it with them. And they made you this legal person, okay, which is a trustee. So when you're dealing with them in a courtroom situation, and you're coming from a position of holding legal title, which a right is a claim, okay? A right is a claim. If you look up property, okay, it's a property right. All the rights are property rights, including rights to yourself. So, and even there are dictionaries that do say exactly that. But as an owner of yourself, you get to make up the rules for yourself, okay? Same as the owner of your property. You get to make the rules. You're in the position of the rule maker for your property. You are the one in the authority seat. You're the judge, okay, over what you do with your property, okay? Anything that you create or is entrusted to you, okay, by God, not by government. You've got to get the third-party interloper out of all of your relationships to go private. And doing that is not all that hard. It really isn't all that hard. It's going to take you, and you can be very creative in the way that you defend yourself. Like we talked about earlier, I mean, you can use the Bible. You can use their rules. You can use, their rules are not your rules. But you can point to what they're supposed to be held to, not you. These aren't for you. But you can, when you, excuse me, when there's a breach of trust on the private side, okay, you look to the indenture. What was the trustee supposed to do? Okay, what were their rules that they were supposed to abide by? That's all the statutes and codes and acts. Those are rules for the trustees. They're not for the man or the woman, which is why they have to make you a trustee on the public side in order to make you a fiduciary and the one responsible. Excuse me. Does anybody have any questions?
Hey,
sorry, I'm going
David?
to need to take a minute and what's that?
Oh, I was just curious. The case Kelby referenced, was it Wendell versus Delaware?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I will have a recording of the show later. So, but I am pretty sure that's what he said.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So there's, again, the rules that they make are for themselves and for the public side. The public cannot come onto the private without the private owner's permission, because the private owner makes the rules for that property. And if you are that property, it's wherever you are. So if you're standing in the courtroom, the air that you're breathing and the little patch of floor that you're standing on is all private. There is a barrier around you if you are private. When you go in there and you're acting as their, when they call your name and you go, yep, I'm here, you just became trustee for the public and are about to get fined and run over. And that's what happens when you go in there and you feel like you just got run over and that you didn't have any rights. It's because they don't recognize rights. They look at privileges, permissions, things that they have control over. That's all they have control over. They cannot control you if you know who you are and where you stand and what authority you walk in and what you operate in, the authority that you walk and operate in. If you're sitting in your private property, conveyance, vehicle, whatever it is, it's private property. The border is right where your stuff starts. And they cannot trespass. That is trespassing if they do breach that private public boundary. And they are outside of their authority, so it's ultra vires as well. They are acting outside of their authority. The second they step into the private, they're acting outside of their authority, and they don't have any protection. Okay? And then that's exactly how that works. So I say, you don't have to deal with fictions and offices. Okay? You can get rid of the office that they're hiding behind, because just like any corporation or any type of entity, fraud is going to pierce that corporate veil. They cannot hide behind it anymore. They lose any supposed, immunities from prosecution. If they're not acting, if they weren't doing exactly what their job was supposed to be, okay, and acting within the authority that they supposedly have, which is fraudulent to begin with, so it's an easy argument to make, and also a very, very easy thing to prove that fraud has been committed. And Kelby mentioned it earlier as far as, not having full disclosure with, between your mother and the doctor and what was actually going on when they were doing the record of live birth, okay, and creating a title like as if you were a piece of property, a thing, a car, a house, or anything like that. It's a title that was given. It was a split, and part of it went back. Your mom had beneficial use. Your parents had beneficial use. They were guardians, fiduciaries for the public. Okay, they were entrusted to. You were entrusted to them by government. Okay, they basically replaced God in the situation and became lawmaker and ruler over you, judge. Okay, by non-full disclosure and with the intent to defraud and to steal your estate, which is up on the public debt board. What, 22 trillion, 25 trillion gazillion dollars, of fake currency. It's intent to defraud, which is exactly what has been done, from the beginning. And fraud is fraud from the beginning. So easy to prove that, anything and everything they're doing is illegitimate. And if you are learning to, deal with the public and deal with the courts and these agents that call themselves government, I'm assuming that you're doing it not because you want to go commit crimes and get away with them. A crime is where there's a victim. Okay, and if you've been listening to my show at all, or doing some research on your own, that about 98% of the cases, the charges that are brought in courtrooms in this country, are for victimless crimes. Another oxymoron, because you cannot have a crime without a victim. Okay, so it's not a crime. These are sins against the state that is claiming to actually acting as if they are God. So they're acting the same way as the kings and the queens of old, or not even that old. There's plenty of them still out there claiming that they rule by divine right. Okay, and I don't see that anywhere. Okay, that there's some divine right that there's bloodline, a bunch of inbreeders from England or wherever are, have a divine right to rule over you. Okay, we were called to love our neighbor, not rule over them. That's my stance, and that's where I stand in a courtroom. That's where I stand outside of the courtroom in my private dealings, and and if you're responsible for your own actions and you manage your own affairs, okay, that's all. Now it's your it's your responsibility to self-govern and be responsible in that respect. It's not a license to commit crime. If you harm somebody or their, somebody else's rights or property, remember, all rights are property rights. So if you harm somebody else's rights or their person, then you've got a claim and you've got to fess up and be responsible for the damage that you do. Okay, there's that's the responsible thing to do. But nobody can put a gun to your head like they do on the public side and tell you got to do this, you got to do that, and you didn't hurt anybody, but you owe me $1,000, because we've got to go out for filet mignon and lobster later, with the rest of the judges and prosecutors, and go have drinks on your behalf, because we represent you. We're gonna use your money instead of you. We're going to use your time and assets and your labor instead of you. And that's what they're doing. They're forcing you in the public to basically to grant all of your assets, everything that, your birthright and your life's estate, and even, all of the generations before us, to the public to do with what they want. Now, obviously, they're $20-something trillion in debt. They're not good managers of the trust. They haven't been good stewards of the things that have been entrusted to them. So why would you trust them with yours? And by taking your things out of the public into the private, you get to say and make the rules up over those things, and that holds up in court by their own rules and their own admittances based on all of these, few hundred years of man's laws that were created here, and in thousands of years. If you go back to Rome and Babylon, where a lot of these, these civil law systems came into existence, free-range slavery. We will get you to, we will get you to contract with us, and we will forcefully control the resources unless you do, and that's been going on as long as there's been governments of man to lord over others and enslave others. Why people continue to put up with it and forget put up with it, even think that it's even the slightest bit legitimate. I mean, how could you look at the system and say, oh yeah, we've got, we got the fox guarding the hen house and making up the rules as to how many eggs the hen's got to lay today, for our dinner. It's ridiculous that you think that would be legitimate, not fraudulent. Anything forced is void, and everything that you're doing, if you do not go to the court when they tell you to go to the court, blah, 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 then you are going to be forced there at gunpoint, threatened to be put into a cage. So not showing up is just not, I'm not going to show up. You're literally taking your life in your hands unless you know how to operate and to question that authority that they are coming at you in, with the authority that you walk in. And that's where you need to, really understand who you are. It's not about documents. It's about knowing who you are and who you're not. You can defend who you are all day long, and this Public Law 9780, okay, if it doesn't help in any other way, it does say in the Bible that God created mankind. Okay, and the creator of a thing has authority over it. Whoever authored it has authority over it. So at the very least, you can say, well, and then God gives you free will. So there you go. You have the authority, all the authority that you need, given to you by your creator, right? He could have said, creator could have said, well, no, you've got to follow my law or I'll hit you with the hammer, kind of like what government does, That doesn't happen, okay? You have free will. You figure your stuff out. It's your relationship with your creator. It's private. It's personal. It's your own. And that's something that they cannot get between at all, because this public law also lines up with their constitutional, First Amendment rights to freedom of religion. Okay? So you have the right to practice whichever way you want, and it shows that in their rules. Okay? They have to recognize it. They have to take judicial notice of that. And they don't like it. They'll squirm in their seats. They're afraid the cat's going to get out of the bag, that they're committing fraud, and that you're going to disrupt the brainwashing of the people in the room that that they're holding this hearing in. And they'll try to get rid of you as quick as possible by saying, case dismissed. I had a judge one time say, I don't want you in my courtroom anymore. I said, is that your judicial decision? And she freaked out. She says, I want you out of here. I said, case dismissed, and I walked out the door. And, I was doing what she asked me to do. I didn't want to be there to begin with. But, if you ask the right questions, they're not going to be happy about it. They will squirm in their seats because it's not like they don't know what is being done to the masses. They don't, it's not like these people don't understand that it's a racket. It's racketeering. What they're doing is, extorting money at gunpoint. Taxes, fines, fees, hidden contracts that they are binding you to without any of your, hopefully you're getting knowledge and understand that there's hidden contracts and things that bind you to this public. And part of what I'm doing and what Kelby's doing is teaching you how to navigate through and deal with those attacks on your person and on you as a man or a woman. And if you can deal with those things in a way that they have to take notice, they tend not to railroad you when you understand and know what it is that they're doing and the fraud that they're committing. Because if you open up that can of worms in their courtroom and start exposing the fraud that's being committed against you, everybody in the courtroom's tainted for the day. I don't know who I was speaking to the other day, but they saw somebody go in and handle the courtroom very similar to that in the private, and and therefore I'm not liable, and I'm not taking I'm not going to be surety and be liable for the legal person. And the judge dismissed the case, and the very next person that got on did the same exact thing, said exactly what the guy said, and they dismissed the case and then canceled court for the day. Everybody else had to leave. Court would be reopened the next morning. And it's because they do not want people to know what's going on. And I bet the room that day, when they saw it happen twice in a row, anybody who was there that day should have gone back and done the exact same thing. And can do the exact same thing. You have to know who you are and who you're not. And you have to walk in your own authority. You have to walk in your own authority. If you're a man or a woman, sui juris, in your own right, okay? And every right is a property right. So you are your own property. And if you understand that, that means that you are the owner of you. And we went through owner earlier. Owner is the exclusive, only one that can make up the rules, that can do whatever they want with their property, their right. Okay, a birthright you get when you come into this, into this world as a man or a woman, or as a child, and it's inherent. Those rights grow as you become more, as the better steward that you are of your property. The more that will expand and grow into a true estate that should pass on to your progeny, not the state, not to the public trust. If you look at probate court, look at what they do when you go into probate court for somebody, a family member that died intestate. Okay, without a will, without a trust, without any last will of what they wanted to do with their property. Okay, they're a state. The state takes it. They will they will manage it down to almost nothing, give out whatever they feel is right in their own eyes, and then take the rest for administrative fees. It's horrible. It's horrible. They steal entire states that way, and they do it all the time because people don't know who they are and the authority that they walk in. They think that they're under these people. They walk into court with their legs shaking, thinking that this person up there in a robe is this all-powerful being that has the right to rule over you and judge. Throw the book at you. Wonder what book they say that they're going to throw at you. Maybe the Bible that they're holding there for for the witnesses to swear on. It's sad, but it's all done blatantly and in your faces. As if you do not see what's going on and research the actual laws that have put all this together. Okay, trust law, bankruptcy law, probate. These are all things that they're administrating the dead fiction, the dead entity, the estate, and making rules over that entity and estate. And if you don't have control of it, or if you haven't collapsed it, then they are the owner of you. They have your title. They own your title, your legal person, which is who, a lot of people are going around misrepresenting as themselves. So that's how they get controlled by this government of corporations and fictions. Anyway, I want to turn it over here to questions for the last part of the show. If there's any questions that you have, if you have a legal topic that you want to discuss or a legal issue that you have questions about, feel free to ask those questions now. Be happy to answer them for about the next 40 minutes. And if I do not get questions, I will be closing down the show a little early. But I am here, and I'm in no rush. So if you do have questions, please feel free to ask them now. Anybody? All right. Well, I do want to say I appreciate everybody listening into the show and following the recordings. I've been getting a lot of people listening to the recorded show, even though they're not able to be here on the show. I really appreciate that, and I hope that the information is helping you in your fight to be free and to win in court as well, under your own authority and not under a liar. But and again, I will be posting the show after once I download it. I will be posting it into all the groups that you may have found the show in, and we'll put that out there. And if you have questions that you don't want public or on the air, absolutely send me a private message on Facebook. You can reach out to me by email at the letter A, freemaninbabylon@gmail.com. If the show is helping you in any way, or you'd like to support it and help support it, both under the invite to the show and to the under the recorded post that I put out there, there is a link to donate to the show Win in Court. PayPal me at Win in Court /Win in Court. But I do appreciate your donations and support for the show, and I appreciate any questions. If you want to be a guest on the show, please shoot an email to me or a private message, and I'll be happy to have you on the show if you've got some legal experience, or if if you've been dealing with, if you were dealing with the state and the courts at all, and you had some success and you'd like to discuss that, I'm happy to do that on the question part of the show, the last hour of the show. Sometimes it's earlier if I don't have a guest. But also, I am looking forward to, and I will be posting probably for next week's show, probably Friday, when I post up for next week's topic, I will be sharing the website for the new private business, Bulletproof Business and Estate Solutions. So we'll be posting the website for that, and there will be quite a few features. It will be a member site. It is private membership, so it's a contract between the parties only, not for the public. And it is the reason for that is because it's a private corporation. It's private business. It's between the parties that contract to do business together in private with no third-party interlopers getting into a private contract. But there is going to be, like I said, I've got a huge library of books that I've put together over the years that I'm putting on there, access to a lot of legal resources on all different types of topics. There will be, obviously, offer counseling. I do offer counseling and advising, business planning, things like that, business funding as well for your private trusts. And I will not be doing like I used to. I will not be doing that with, statutory corporations because, again, I don't deal with the public, and neither should you. But I'm going to wrap up the show. If anybody, I'll put it out there one more time. If anybody has any questions or comments on the show, or if legal topic that you'd like covered or have some questions about, please feel free to ask your questions now. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap up for the evening and bid you a wonderful Sunday night, and hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Say,
Any
David?
questions? Yes.
Yeah, I have one more, and this might be more than you even want to get into, and it just kind of popped into my head. It's nothing pressing. But I think about my brother and sister-in-law were over last night, and, they've always kind of thought I was nuts with what I think about all this, but they're starting to see it. And I pointed out a bunch of stuff to them last night that really made my brother take a closer look. And he has, it's a corporation. And is there a way, because I know if you're a corporate officer, the president or whatever, then you're a taxpayer, you're part of that system no matter what. But can you put like that title into a trust also, and then hold a corporation in trust, a private trust?
Absolutely, and very much like you could put your legal person into a private trust. Yes, you can. I personally prefer not to. Okay. Because it's structured and chartered, that thing is chartered and created by the public.
Yeah.
Now, he can put the entire organizational structure into trust without bringing over the charter. Move it into a private business trust. And that would be much better, because you're basically losing all the restrictions and governing body to his own, as opposed to having to still deal with, the public side of it.
Yeah, and see, I guess part of why I asked this was almost all of his work, he's a contractor, does construction, road work, things like that, and almost all of his work is done, contracted through the state.
If he's got state contracts, and that's a big part of his business, and yes, he can do the trust, and he basically would make the trust he would put that in there, okay, as property of the trust, okay. Again, I would put a layer or two between, the ownership. So basically, he's turning over his. Is it a C corp, an S corp, something like that? Do you know?
I'm not positive. I think it's a C or S corp. I'm not positive.
Okay, S corp is double taxation. C is like stocks, bonds, or stocks in the company. A little bit more. You have stock as well in the S corp, but the taxation of the is handled a little bit differently. Like a close held corporation would be double taxed. So, like the owner under an S. But if either way, he can put the corporation as an asset into a private trust, okay, and then I would make another managing company the trustee. So you're putting the business in an asset trust just as a holding company, as a holding trust, but the beneficiary and trustee would be a couple layers down. So the beneficiary may be a trust 2 or 3 removed from that from the business holding company. Obviously, his family members would be the true beneficiaries in a third trust, and then have a management business, another business trust running that business, a management trust. Okay. So you'd be turning over the day-to-day to the management trust. The asset itself can be utilized to get licenses and all those things, along with, if he has to, which if it's a corporation, he probably isn't using his straw man at all, the legal person.
No,
he's established like that already. Yeah, he's probably built up business credit and, the ability to fund his projects and things like that, all in that corporation if he's been going for a while. So he'd basically be turning ownership of the company. If he can only do the shares that he owns. So if he's got partners, they would have to, they can put their shares into whatever trust they want, but they still have to agree on management if he's got, if it goes like that, if he's got more partners and things like that.
Yeah, and I think, I think they went the route of his wife has some Native American in her, and so she's female plus has Native American in her, so they get a minority status.
Right.
But I know, so she's the main owner, I believe, and then their 2 sons who are adults now. They also have some ownership.
Perfect. So it's a family business. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Because that would be much easier to transfer than there being multiple families involved. And they would operate. I mean, the great thing about it is if they have offshoots of the company, each piece of property, each piece of equipment that they have would be in a holding trust separate, just spreading out liability from. Plus, they could set up a equipment rental trust as a business and lease their own company the equipment. There's a lot of good ways to structure this as a family business, and they can open up new businesses all the time under one management trust.
Okay, and back to when the corporate charter's done and you have the responsible, person, the owner or whatever. That's the actual legal entity person, so you'd have to do that indenture separation also from the live man woman to the person as the responsible party for the corporation, correct?
Right, and what I'd like to do when I set up a trust estate is you have a straw man trust, okay? That trust, and you can call it straw man trust, okay? Every family member's birth certificate, licenses, all of those things are straw man assets, and they are the only things that go into that straw man trust. Underneath that, you've got your various businesses, okay, that are the beneficiaries of that straw man, or those straw men in the trust and can use their credit and different things like that to establish business credit, to get loans and different things like that until the trust itself has the assets to lend its own money, its own resources, rather than going to a commercial bank. And actually, I'm in the process of looking for some private banking partners to be able to do private loans and different things like that outside of commercial, all on the private side, including banking. But yes, so you've got your straw man. In the straw man trust, you can utilize their credit histories and things like that to and the benefits of the straw man, okay, as the beneficiary. Now, the beneficiary would be each of the businesses, okay, of the straw man. Then you've got the trustee, which would be your management trust of all of those, all of the trusts in the estate. Then you've got your holding trust, which is where you're putting your large assets, homes, cars, equipment, things like that. And depending on the size, you would want those in individual holding trusts, right? Because they're liabilities.
Yep.
Any asset can be a liability to the trust. So you want to spread that out.
Hello, Chad? It's just Dave. This is Demetrius, waiting for him to come back. By the way, excellent question.
Oh, thank you.
My eyes wide open.
Yeah, I just kind of thought about it now when, I mean, it's crossed my mind about, he's done very well for himself. My brother, he, started out with, pretty much nothing. We were raised poor and, we weren't lacking, but we sure didn't get vehicles bought for us or anything like that. And, he's done very well for himself, but he's very, very corporate. And I think he's starting to understand some other things here now, a lot of from what I, spout off with. And, I just thought he might be interested in learning about some of this. So. I wonder if David's coming back on.
I think he has to get to the point to realize that he's not on.
Yeah.
Not too many people that usually interrupt him when he's going on, giving us a lot of.
No, I know he might still be talking.
Yes, that's what I was inferring. There he is.
Yeah.
Hey guys, sorry I got cut off.
That's okay, David. We were talking amongst ourselves.
Who else we got?
Hi, Dave. Demetrius. Been listening to about 80% of tonight's call.
Awesome.
You're a very special guest. Great so far.
Yeah, Kelby is a good guest. I appreciate his knowledge and sharing it. Looking forward to having him back next week as well.
Yes.
So what were you guys discussing? When I got cut off.
I just mentioned that it was a very good question. The same thing about moving the, as you described, the corporate structure, not the corporation itself, into the private.
Right.
How you were set up with the beneficiaries and trustees.
And again, he's got Chad's brother had an established business with established public contracts. And they're going to want to only do business with a public company. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with the state, that's just the way it is. And again, it's established, so it doesn't hurt him to hang on to it. It's actually a benefit. The same way that you would use your straw man as a benefit for the private side, you would do the same with this, with this corporation. But the beneficiaries change, okay, from the government as well. because that corporation is being indentured to private trust as asset, okay, and it has to now only serve the trustees of the trustees, the management company, and the beneficiaries of that trust. So he'll still get these contracts. The difference is there's no taxing. You know, he's going to save a ton on taxes and tax requirements. Not that he'll lose all taxes.
The corporation would still be taxed, so correct?
Yes, the corporation could be taxed. However, the trust itself, okay, the trust that owns it, okay, is owned, and the benefits have to go to the beneficiaries of that trust. So this is no longer, it wouldn't be considered for private use or for public use. Okay, so they're going to be taxed differently. So as a corporation, his employees, okay, all have a tax liability, okay,
yeah,
as the legal persons. So he still has to do withholdings. He still has to do, his normal HR requirements and bookkeeping requirements. Now, the difference is all income to the corporation outside of its liabilities and expenses is owed to the beneficiaries of the private trust. Okay? Now, so profits, okay, they're all liened by the beneficiary and for the beneficiary's benefit. Okay, so they can't be taxed. So there's still a lot of tax benefits to doing it this way, and the liability could be brought down to next to zero, which is how corporations like Trump Corp and all these other corporations that are public corporations, or LLCs, or I should say publicly chartered corporations owned by private trusts, are not paying taxes on profits because the profits are not due to the profits are liened by the beneficiaries and for their benefit only. Okay? And they cannot tax future generations. Okay? But it can be taxed, because there is a record of it, because there is still a private or a public, still public ties and public charter. Excuse me. The beneficiaries, once they receive, if the corporation is dissolved, okay, and they get paid out, the beneficiaries could have a tax liability if they're not in the private. If it's private, it can be, dispatched any number of ways without a tax liability. But just like their employees, okay, if they're still operating their legal person, they have a tax liability, and the company itself, its charter, requires withholding for those employees. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, or even a 1099 if they, if they're doing, if they're working under 1099, which a lot of times they're not allowed to, private contractor, but in certain circumstances they can. I know these public contracts have a lot of restriction, so
yeah,
it all depends on how those are written. But he could definitely lower his tax liability. Not his responsibility to withhold for his employees, which are chartered under that corporation. But definitely his income in the private, because of his, if he were to do put the straw man into trust, his own salary and stuff out of the corporation wouldn't be taxed, nor would his wife or the kids.
But he would be getting paid as a trustee instead of as an employee, right?
No. he would still be getting paid as an employee and a trustee if he is one of the trustees of the management company, which is where, and he could pay him out of his own tax savings.
Yeah, I know. I think last year, and I mean, he's not a huge business in, you look nationwide, but where I live, I think he did like about $30 million last year.
Yeah, that's not too shabby.
No, to me, it's sure not.
But then you got to wonder what his tax liability is too.
Oh, I know, and he's really smart with money and things, but it's all very conventional.
Right.
And that's why I thought, your knowledge may benefit him, and if he wanted to go with you, he certainly could afford to pay you for your time.
Yeah. So, I don't take advantage of if he's got a lot or a little. It's the same price, so it doesn't matter.
yeah, but you get your value for what you get. But I'll visit with him a little bit about it, and I mean, I understand a lot of this way more than he does, and I'll see if he's willing to talk to you, and I'll even pay for an hour of your time if he's willing to talk to you and you're willing to visit with him. So
sure, of course. Yeah, okay. I'd be happy to answer any of his questions and help him better understand the benefits of trust, in private trust especially. But he'll save a lot in taxes. It's not all, but it can with the right depending on who's doing the books, he can definitely save by doing this in private. Turning all of that, including his own income, private. He's going to be saving double taxation on his own salary, and the salary, the withholding on his own salary. Okay. So he'd be pushing all that tax liability would be gone, and all profits. What's left after that? Expenses, liabilities. He has a break even of 0 at the end of every year because all the profits are spoken for.
Does that hurt him at all? I mean, as far as being able to borrow money if you're not showing a profit?
No. He's showing a profit.
Oh,
he's showing a profit. The profit is indentured to another trust.
Oh, okay.
It's not like the money it's not like that disappears.
No, it's just what happens to it. Yeah.
Right. It's where it goes. It's booked out in the accounting as a liability.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. It's a dead oak.
I'll visit with them. That was very, very informational to me. Thanks, David.
Yeah, you're welcome. Demetrius, did you have any other questions?
I did. I do want to expand on that whole idea of taking the corporation structure and putting it into a trust, but it just dawned on me a little more depth knowledge of the profit being indentured, and it's labeled, it's at the liability to another entity. It's kind of like having the straw man indentured. It still shows that there's income, but
the straw man's a slave to just a different entity. Yeah. The straw man is indentured to a totally different entity than the public. Big difference. It becomes your slave instead of the public slave.
A guest you had on a couple of weeks ago, I forgot his name, who talked about entities. And he was a minister, and he talked about incorporating yourself, as he referenced that Trump did mention that in the article. If someone doesn't like the taxes, so forth, just incorporate yourself. And I want to explain.
Well, if you incorporate yourself, And I've seen people that used to do that. I know there's people that do that still, but I've seen people do that years ago in order to set up a new. They set themselves up as a corporation named after their all caps name, right? It's kind of like cloning the straw man, okay? But you're still in the public. It's still a public servant in a corporation, and you're getting a new tax ID number, a new social for the business that you just created, the new entity you just created, okay? But it's still under government charter and therefore government authority because the government allowed it to be created under their system.
And then if a person were to indenture or move over that corporate structure to a private trust.
Yes, and sometimes it's, you can do that. You can do that, but why not separate? Why not separate? If you put the straw man into its own trust, right, indenture that to a business, right, so that now that business gets the benefits. He can use the straw man's credit rating and title and all of that stuff to generate credit for the business itself, and the business becomes the beneficiary of the benefits that the straw man is entitled to. Okay, so but the difference is if you're doing it in a private business trust as opposed to an LLC or a C Corp or an S Corp or anything like that, a government chartered company, okay, if you do it that way, the government has no authority over the business itself because they didn't charter it.
Right, I was going to say entertainment for a moment. If, just for entertainment purposes, if someone incorporated themselves, indentured their straw man to a private trust, took their incorporation themselves and indentured that to a private business trust, is that additional layering? But what I do want to touch on, regardless of where we go with this conversation, is the incorporating of oneself, which is a public entity. Doesn't that take and change what I want to, I don't know if status is the right word, from an employee status to an employer status?
Yes, it does, but you could set up an LLC with no employees. It's a member-owned entity, okay? And any corporation that you are, you become an employee of that corporation. You're not the owner, okay? You're separating yourself from liability. That's the whole point of incorporation to begin with. Okay, I set up companies for years, corporations, statutory entities. And when you do that, you're opening yourself up to government regulation and governing, okay, of your business. Okay, so you don't. I prefer not to. I'm not saying that you can't. You can. But I prefer not to have the government's hand in my private business anyway. I don't want anything that's been chartered by them. I don't even want the straw man personally, which is why I would choose to collapse the trust, and that's probably something that I'm going to start doing here just to show everybody it can be done. But I haven't used the Social Security card in 10 years. I don't use the birth certificate for anything other than going into court. So, is it tough? Yeah, it's been a little tough. But, just because I've taken a hiatus for the last 5 years, from my other business and decided that, I didn't want to be, creating slaves to debt, and then I didn't want to deal with public entities anymore. I didn't want to deal with government entities anymore. I didn't want a third-party interloper as a partner in everything that I did. So I set that aside and, changed for the last 5 years, all I've been doing is helping people out of court and legal situations, and teaching them to to handle their own business, and it's definitely not a get rich quick scheme for anybody who's out there wanting to do it, but it's helped. That was I felt like I was actually helping people than putting them into debt slavery, especially people that don't understand finance, don't understand that directions when you are explaining to them how to, if you're going to borrow it, you don't use it for anything except to make money. The debt has to pay for itself. These are principles of borrowing that people just don't get. They get a hold of a chunk of money and it's gone in 3 months. And they didn't do what you told them to do. They spent it on a car. They spent it on, a company car, whatever. But it's a depreciating asset. They could have leased a car for a hell of a lot less and wrote off 100% on their corporation. They could have, they go on vacations and say it was for business, and they spend a fortune and do all this stuff. Yes, it's creating write-offs, but you're doing it with debt. It's kind of why consumer debt is as horrible as it is, and people can't afford to pay their minimum balances, and they're paying on stuff that should have been paid for in cash using credit. And then they get, they're not using credit to make money, okay, or to extract value. They're using it to buy stuff that is depreciating and is not making money. It's not paying the bill for the credit you just used. And they get in trouble, and then they become a slave to debt. And most times they're going to go under that way. So I didn't want to do that anymore. So I went into something that I felt was more beneficial to the people that I talked to. And then, again, the new business is Bulletproof Business and Estate Solutions. It's very much like what I did for the past 17 years. It's business, it's business planning, it's business funding, it's all of those things, but it's doing it on the private side, completely on the private side, and keeping your straw man trust out of it, or your LLC out of your private business, other than it owes a debt to these private trusts, okay, which is how you can, turn those profits into liabilities and lose the tax liability altogether, like we were talking about a few minutes ago. I would say, yeah, if you have an LLC like what Chad's brother does, or a company that has been established and is doing something and requires that public charter to operate, no doubt, it's fine. You can definitely put a corporation into a private trust and indenture it as property, and the beneficiaries will benefit from it. It's just like any other asset. A business is an asset. It's its own entity, but it's also, whoever's holding all the stock, if that's a private trust, that's who that business works for, is the stockholder. Corporations work for their stockholders. Trustees work for their beneficiaries. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes. But you, another topic you brought up was possibly collapsing the trust to show that it can be done, and mentioned the Social Security number. I'm not sure. I'm wondering if it's the same when you're collapsing Social Security trust. And
yes,
part of topics that we were talking about tonight, office of person.
Yes, that's a
with
good.
The Social Security number. Do you say that again, please?
Yeah. I was going to say, if you want to do some really good research, look up the office of person.
I had started a couple of weeks ago looking up offices, and then executing the Social Security number, being the executor.
Yes. Well, that's declaring it dead. You're declaring it a dead entity, and you are as the executor, doing the final will and testament. You are transferring the deeds of trust by deed of trust, any and all assets that were in that trust. As executor, you're the one that's in charge of doing that for the dead entity's estate. Okay, that's the executor position. If you look at probate law, okay, look at probate. Look at the terms intestate and what happens when there is no will. Well, you have the will. You have a living will, inter vivos will, that show, an inter vivos trust, with a will, and you are executing as the executor the will of the deceased entity. Okay, and you do that as, at the end of a trust. There's about to be a disbursement. All those disbursements will go to the beneficiaries, which hopefully are in a new trust, private. So that, all of those assets that are going to be coming out of that dead entity or that dead trust go to your private side. But again, if you collapse it, you can't use it. If it's dead, you can't use it, right?
Right. So would that be pseudo the same as you had a call with Robert Michaels and talked about indenturing the straw man, but also the process for the Social Security trust and taking full control of the assets because it could be, raising the issue that it could be better managed. Is executing the Social Security number along those same lines, or maybe so?
Well, if you look at the Social Security, look at the Social Security Trust Act, and that is a trust that was set up on the straw man's behalf. Okay, it's just one of many. The Department of Motor Vehicles Trust. Anything that there's, any of these departments are meant to administer the public trust. Okay, they all have their own things. So if there's the Department of Licensing for professional licensing, or corporate, through the Secretary of State, which is what sets up corporations and charters corporations. Okay, you're entrusting your business to the state. Okay, under a corporate charter. They are the trustees. They're going to make up the rules of what you can and can't do, and you're paying them for that. That's what the companies are paying taxes for. Okay, so by having that, if you were to, again, you can control it, from the private side, and use it as a puppet, like getting credit for you to be able to use for your own personal business. Okay, for your private business, or you can collapse the entire thing and demand a full accounting on everything that they've done and kick them out of your business altogether. However, if you collapse it, then you're dealing with private identifications. They have to provide you with a national, U.S. national passport, okay, because you were born here, so they have to be,
Dave, could you repeat that for me, please?
I said that they would have to, as far as the passport, you would be dealing mostly with private identifications and private notices, and dealing privately with individuals, not corporate fictions. One of the things that Kelby had said earlier is a corporation cannot do business with a man or a woman. They can't. They have to do business with a consumer or some other title, okay? What's his name? Carl Cantiff, I believe. Anyway, this guy, he was, I'm going to have him on the show eventually. He did a 65-page indictment against the banks, just tearing apart all the banking rules and acts and laws. For like 8 years he did this. And banks are not allowed to do business with U.S. citizens. And the reason is because a U.S. citizen is the creditor and not the debtor in the banking industry. Banks do nothing except take the credit of the people and create money out of it, thin air, right? Promissory notes, things like that, which are all negotiable instruments that you sign on behalf of the straw man. And then they monetize it into Federal Reserve promissory notes. Okay? So when that happens, you're getting, when that happens, you're dealing with, things that were entrusted to them. Okay? The promissory note, you can make a promissory note right now, and it is cash, whatever the value on that face is. Okay? You can use the birth certificate instrument as a bond and use those benefits the way that they were supposed to be used, operating that straw man from the private what we were just talking about a few minutes ago. Or you can collapse the trust, ask them to do a full accounting, and take over managing all of your own affairs and property. But you cannot use it to get credit. But if you collapse the trust, I'm sure there would be enough assets that you would recoup from that breach of trust and that collapse that you could collateralize pretty much anything you want from the private side. You don't need to.
If I could just say something, David, you brought up, about people going into debt with credit cards or whatever is, if it's not paying itself off. And I just hope for any listeners out there that, they don't end up losing things or filing bankruptcy. Debt is not too hard to get rid of in my experience, other than a mortgage. So, and I'd gladly help anybody I could with that, but it's just don't just let them come and take your stuff.
You have to fight for what's yours. You have to. And knowing that what they're doing out there is fraud and a breach of the trust, it's, that's where you're going and you're spending your focus when you're dealing with these people. You're not there to talk about the speeding ticket. The real issue, the question before the court is, do you own me or the property that you are talking about? Do you have jurisdiction? Do you have authority? Subject matter over the subject matter. And what's the subject matter when you go in the court? The contracts that they're talking about, a license, the public or the person, the office of person, like what Kelby was talking about. They have authority over that because of contracts. And then you go into exposing the fraud of those contracts, and that should really just tear apart any case that they be trying to that they're trying to make.
Yeah.
So, but as far as bankruptcy goes, this country has been in bankruptcy since 1933. It's a very well-established fact. Public Law 7310, HJR 192. You have the right to set off and discharge any and all debts, public or private. So, and that can be done either way, even whether or not you collapse a trust and make a demand for a full accounting and, get full ownership of all of the things that they have taken and used over the years. And which I had a client that I was helping out a couple years ago, and I had never seen. He had done a forensic audit on his Social Security numbers. Every time he got a new Social Security card, it was a different CUSP number, and he was wondering what was going on and why these were all different. Well, every time he applied for a new card, they created a new account. And they were trading on it as if he was another individual and created a new entity with that same name. And then they tied them all together. And the forensic accounting was absolutely outstanding. It was amazing how much money that moved through these CUSP numbers and how many times it was traded, and the amount of profit was in the millions and millions.
I I did a forensic audit on a mortgage I had, and I mean, honestly, I that was a big learning experience for me. And
right? The numbers are ridiculous.
Yeah, but I ended up, at least at this point, losing the property. It's up for sale right now. But I did a forensic audit on that, and it was a $35,000 note. And the amount of money that number took in, the QSIP number off of that, the note, was like $4.6 million or something. It was just ridiculous.
Off of $35,000, off a $35,000 signature. Well, you know what it sounds like to me? That note that you signed was counterfeited over and over and over and over again, and to the tune of $4.5 million.
Yeah,
that's fraud. That's fraud.
It is, but you know, I mean, my problem was I didn't know how to fight it. I sued Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance because they were the ones that, as soon as I started challenging this stuff, the so-called, and which I looked it up, they were the creditor at the time, PennyMac Loans. As soon as I started challenging them, then they sent me a notice that it was sold to Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance, which I believe is a division of Bear Stearns. And then, so I sued them in federal court, and I didn't know my way around court well enough and everything, and then all of a sudden it reverted back that PennyMac Loans Servicing was the creditor, and so it was like, okay, the company I'm suing is not even the creditor, and they just swap stuff around, and it's very difficult when you get into a mortgage type of situation in my limited experience.
When you go into a mortgage, when you go into that bank to get a loan, okay, they do a mortgage contract, and then they do a promissory note. Well, the second they do the mortgage contract, you owe them money, right? If they lent you any. But then they require you to provide a promissory note, which is money at its face value. Yeah. They put that in another account, a private account that they don't tell you about, and then they lend your account that you know about the money, okay? Or it goes directly to the seller, okay, in a real estate transaction, right, at the closing table. The check's made out to the seller. You never even put your hands on it.
No.
Right? So you never had any fiduciary control over it. It goes from the bank into basically a holding account until the closing, right?
Yeah.
An escrow account. So, and that's usually in the name of the lawyers that are handling the case. And they're supposed to pay you interest on that as well. But beside that, so what happens is they're supposed to destroy the note, okay? It's cash. It's done. It's already been monetized, okay, and put into that other account, which paid the mortgage. So they lent you your own money, basically. But they copy the note, and that's what they're selling. Because you are the holder in due course of the note. Your name is on it. You signed it, and it's sitting in a private account, the original 35, gaining interest.
Yeah. And also the note and the mortgage can't be separated or it invalidates them, correct?
Correct. So they have to be transferring the two of them to be sold. Okay, let's say they sell the note. What are they selling the note for and how much? Right? They're selling the note for whatever the value is left on it, right? Supposedly. Plus interest and all that fun stuff. Well, when they do that, they've been paid in full. So there was offer and presentment, right? So why, as a private banker, okay, you could do the same thing. You fill out another promissory note, okay, and you discharge the debt. You discharge the debt. They can't keep trading on it. They can't keep trading on it. You got to cut them off. You got to cut them off. And then you go after them for fraud. You go after them for fraud because they committed fraud to begin with, and that's provable.
Yeah, but that's the problem is having the knowledge to do that, along with filing things in the electronic court system, PACER, and doing all that properly. And, they just make it so difficult. I just kind of gave up, but it was.
That's what they hope for. Yeah, that's what they hope for. But the nice thing is you're learning, and you could always reopen a case against them for fraud.
Yeah, because I dismissed the case on my own without prejudice, so I could reopen it again.
Good.
And I don't know, I'm not quite ready to mentally to do that yet.
Right, and it does take it takes some understanding of the laws of redemption. Okay, because it is still your property. You didn't give up your claim to the property. Obviously, your claim was the claim that you were making in court, and you did it without prejudice to be able to bring it back as you bring in more evidence and proof of whatever it is you're going to, whatever claim it is you're bringing against them. I would be bringing, at the very least, a fraud claim and a breach of trust claim, because a bank is acting in a fiduciary as a fiduciary. It is a trust relationship. And you were the grantor and they were the trustee, and they had full fiduciary responsibility and control, and you never touched the asset. You never touched them. They put it in a private bank, they put it in a private account, and, it's money of account is all it is. Transfer of zeros and ones to, an account, and that's all it was. They created it out of thin air, and then are holding you to your blood, sweat, and tears. It's a death contract, a mortgage.
Yeah, it is, because I had done very well with debt. I mean, I have equipment I leased, but under like the Uniform Commercial Code, it's not a lease; it was a loan. And they call it a lease, but it wasn't. I have a car that I took a loan out on, and I haven't paid on either one of those things for a year and a half. And I mean, I still have them, and they've tried to take them. And it's just a simple matter of challenging them, right? It's. Yes. I'm not saying I'm wonderful at anything. It's just understanding certain things, like you're teaching. That's.
And in order to protect these things up front, you need to move them into your own private trust, reclaim legal title, and and utilize a trust deed to put it into the trust. Then it's trust property. These creditors cannot go after trust property because it doesn't belong to you, the trustee. It belongs now to the beneficiaries, and it's entrusted to whoever's in charge of it. The trustee. Yeah. So you've got to protect yourself from. This is how you protect yourself from the public side, and that's any of their, corporate chartered corporations. These are all. The federal government is the parent corporation to every single LLC, C Corp, S Corp, limited partnerships, all these fictitious entities, other than private trust. Here, let me read something real quick, because I'm in the process of putting together a judicial notice, a private trust affidavit, okay? And in your contracts, you want to put the definitions of things, okay? Private trust is a trust created for the benefit of individuals other than the public or a charitable purpose. It is created for the financial benefit of one or more designated beneficiaries rather than for the public benefit. It's separate. and where the public cannot go into private, okay, without compensation to the owner. So if your property was in private trust, it would be eminent domain. Any attack on that private property would be an eminent domain issue. It's not a financial issue at that point. And then you just use, you use a promissory note and discharge the debt from the private side. You discharge that promissory note. You discharge the contract. Okay, the contract is defunct. It's done. You withdraw from the contract. You can cancel a contract, especially if it was done in fraud. And that's where you bring your case. So an unincorporated, the definition of unincorporated is a business that has not become a legal corporation or an area that is not part of a town, county, or territory under governing authority. That's unincorporated. The law does not take notice. Right? Unincorporated is private contracts. Private contracts, the law is created from the contract itself, the terms of the contract itself. And people won't be signing these crazy contracts with banks if they knew what was going on when they created them. And I've seen and heard people trying to deposit a promissory note. Okay, there's videos all over YouTube about that type of stuff, and they can use a promissory note to discharge. You can use the birth certificate to discharge. It is an instrument being traded. It's the full faith and credit of the people. That's being used to discharge and offset financial liabilities because there is no money. It's the only way it can be done. And if people learn how to do it,
that's one thing I would like to learn how to do. I'm just today I have some rental properties. It's like 2 one-bedroom 8-plexes in a small town, and I get a lot of people with disabilities and different things like that. Just today I got a guy, he's a Gulf War veteran, double amputee, right above the knee, looking for a place to live. And I for the last few years I've been thinking, it's like, if I could figure out or understand how to turn that so-called lease agreement into a promissory note of, yes, you're willing to pay this, and then I can deposit that, and I could give them free rent and have
Isn't that amazing?
What's that?
And that's the way it's supposed to have. That's the way it's set up. That's what banks are doing, and they don't have that right without us having the same rights privately.
I know that. That's why I want to be able to do it, and it's not so I can line my pockets. It's like, so I know I'm gonna get reimbursed for it, but it's like some of these people, you want to help, but I can't afford to just give people free rent and then end up paying for their utilities,
Correct. Yeah, no, I get it. And if things were working, if this financial system was working the way it was supposed to, that debt clock would be at zero.
Yeah.
It would be absolute zero because, it would go up every month and then drop off because it's set off at the end of the month, any recurring debts. But any fixed debts can be discharged 100%, back down to zero. And that's accounting. You add your assets and your liabilities got to zero out.
Yeah, the ledger's got to be balanced.
Right. And that's why the government doesn't have a balanced budget, nor have they had one in years and years. Meanwhile, they're sitting on stores of cash, hordes of it, in the form of hard assets, properties that they've stolen from people, and they're reselling all the gold, all the silver, all the platinum, all the oil, all the everything that's a natural resource, and tell me this isn't communism. It is communism.
Oh, yeah. And then you look at what you just brought up with gold, silver, and platinum. Then they sell, certificates of it. I know. Right. I've invested in some silver.
And hold on to the asset.
Yeah. there's like way more time, pounds, however you want to measure it, ounces of silver that's sold on paper than there is actually in existence,
Exactly. That's because they made it into a commodity, and then they made derivatives off of it. And that's the same thing that caused the crash in '08. And the only ones that ever made anything were these freaking criminal bankers that walked away with billions.
Yeah.
Without being held accountable.
Yeah.
So when's the fraud over? And then you got Obama. Not only did they steal the original money, but they turned around and bailed them out with enough to get going and, to replace everything they stole and to steal for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So to make sure they stayed solvent, and they took over a lot of these banks.
Right. They've done just enough to maintain public confidence.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to restore they're trying to restore the trust, but it can't be. It cannot be. If tomorrow everybody woke up and said, "We don't trust you anymore," it would collapse in a heartbeat. They'd have nothing. They would be called onto the carpet, make a full accounting. Sorry, you don't have it? Well, guess what? We're liquidating your homes, your kids' college money, your retirement funds, everything that you stole out of the trust.
Yep.
And it could happen tomorrow if people would wake up. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of people wearing their blinders and, putting their faith into a bunch of criminals. And you see them every day waving their flag going, rah, rah, rah. Oh, it's my president. No, it's not my president. It's a circus. The public is an absolute circus. So, anyway, guys, is there anything? I hope I covered it. I want to make some dinner here. It's been a long day, and we're pushing 3.5 hours here soon. So
you did great as usual, David. You did great. I'm going to talk to my brother, see if he'll visit with you, and I can't say he's up for it right now, but I've been slowly working on him for years, and last night I saw a little improvement, so I hope he'll maybe take at least some time to visit with you.
Yeah, invite him to listen to some of the podcasts too. I mean, we talk about this stuff a lot. And it makes sense. I mean, it's 100% legitimate. You have a right to contract, to privately contract with whoever you want, and their Constitution. The First Amendment. What is the First Amendment in Section 10? Upholds your right to contract, and at the same time your right to withhold contract from anybody you choose. So, and then that's what the private is based on, is private contract, not being contracted under, the guise of some government, authority. And that's, it's super important to know the difference, between a legitimate contract and what you've been duped into believing your whole life, and that's hard to overcome. Some people don't overcome it. It flies in the face of everything they were taught.
Yeah. And I'd like to just say, Demetrius, thank you. You put, I know I probably talk more than I should, but you put in some good input, and I mean, I think that's important on these calls, is for multiple people to chime in and talk and get some good advice from somebody that knows. So I appreciate you being here too.
Yeah, I appreciate it as well. And all the questions always make the show much, much better, and people really do learn because they're going through the same things. They're asking the same questions. They're the ones that are silent and are coming on later on and asking, hey, I heard this on your show. So-and-so was talking about this, and I'm in the same bind, or I've got the same issue. And it helps them for sure. So, when you guys are sharing like that and asking questions, it helps everybody. And it makes the show much more interesting. So I appreciate that for sure. And Demetrius, you know, if, give me a call this week, and we'll get you rolling in a couple of with a couple of new books and get you started here.
Thank you both of you, Chad.
Yeah, no, you too, Demetrius. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming on the show. Enjoy your evening, and we'll talk soon. And thanks for being on the show and asking your questions. And appreciate everybody else tuning in. Thank you as well. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and good night. This has been How to Win in Court Without a Liar, and this is Dave Horowitz. Thanks again, guys. Bye now.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.